Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to Chilltown Hoops. I'm your host, Jermaine. The youngsters call me OG. My friends call me J-Dub. Let's get to it. You know, when you get to this part of the season, it's like a Broadway show. Like, we've done this so many different times that we've gone over in rehearsal. We've gone over this in our meetings. We know exactly what it is that we're doing. We shouldn't be tripping over each other. You know what your mark is. You know what your spot is. You know when you're supposed to come in. You know when you're supposed to fall back. So we've gotten our routine down. At this point, we should have this thing, we should be able to do this with our eyes closed. Well, that didn't look like the case with the Boston Celtics early. They looked like a group who just got together and they were trying to figure it out. They were bunched up. They were tripping over each other. Their routine just looked sloppy. They didn't look like a group that had been together for as long as they'd been together and been practicing for as long as they'd been together. They just didn't look sharp. And it showed. Harford, Smart, and Brown, they start the game 3 for 14, including Jaylen Brown, who goes 2 for 10 to start the game at the half. He's 2 for 10. Now, Jaylen Brown is one of those guys who he gets going early, that gets them going. And that's part of the routine. When he gets going, they get going. Jason Tatum is one of those guys who his game is predicated on doing other stuff. Don't worry about him scoring, because he'll get involved as the game goes on. That's just who he is. That's always been who he is. His game is not just predicated on him scoring the basketball. He can get going when scoring, but he'll do the other things that'll get him going. But that's also predicated on Jaylen Brown to get them going offensively. And he didn't, not only did he not get going, none of those guys got going early. But then the third quarter came around. And they got back to being the Boston Celtics, which is, the Boston Celtics are a transition team. Not only are they a transition team, they're the best defensive team in the game. They're one of the best rebounding teams in the game. And at some point in the game, they're going to hold you down. That's just who they are. And that's when the third quarter came around. Jason Tatum got a lot of his stuff in transition. Jaylen Brown got a lot of his stuff in transition. But the difference in this game was turnovers. And the turnovers that they were making were turnovers that were very much uncharacteristic of them. They were turning the basketball over in the second quarter. They were turning the basketball over in the first quarter like they had never played together. Just completely being careless with the basketball. 18 turnovers for the game. As opposed to the Golden State Warriors, 6 turnovers for the game. That's triple. And Golden State ends up converting double digits off those turnovers. Well, when you're giving up that many turnovers and these guys convert, that's the difference in the ball game. That's going to be a huge difference in the ball game, especially when we're at this juncture. Because mistakes have to be minimal. Mistakes can't be, we can't have mistakes compounded by bigger mistakes. So we're turning the basketball over, and then on top of us turning the basketball over, we foul. We're turning the basketball over, and on top of us turning the basketball over, we give up a 3-ball, or we give up an and one, or we giving up points in transition. And that's what the Boston Celtics were doing. Not taking care of the basketball, turning the basketball over in dramatic fashion, and that's what was killing them. Well, they did everything else really good. They won the rebound battle. They took care of the they won the rebound battle. And when I say they won the rebound battle, I'm talking about the Golden State Warriors go 9 for 21 in the first half. 10 of those 21 shots were one and done. Now, when you limit a team like the Golden State Warriors to one shot, well, you give yourself a really good chance. You give yourself a really good chance to win when you limit them to one shot. Unlike Game 4, where they get 15 offensive rebounds. Well, you don't have a shot when you're doing that. You don't. You don't have a shot when you're doing that. You give them 15 offensive rebounds as opposed to this game where you out-rebound them. You end up out-rebounding them plus, I think it was plus 9. Yeah, +8. I'm sorry. You end up out rebounding them +8, +5 on the offensive backboard. Well, you give yourself an opportunity to win when you're doing that. Absolutely, you do. But when you're turning the basketball over, you're not. You're basically giving them the ball right back. I thought they did a good job on Steph Curry. I do. I thought they did a really good job on Steph Curry. I thought they did a good job of pushing him further away from the basket, making his looks more difficult than they were in the past. Now, of course, he had a stellar game in Game 4, and he comes out and goes 0 for 9 on the long ball. I mean, is that Steph Curry? I don't think so. I expect a different output from him in Game 5 and Game 6. Absolutely, I do. We're talking about a team who Klay Thompson was the only starter to hit a long ball. None of those other guys hit long balls. But even with Steph doing what he did, going 7 for 22 and 0 for 9 on the long ball, he's still good enough to keep himself relevant in the game because he's always going to be a threat. Always. Because he could go 0 for 9 and then hit his next 5 shots. That's his game. That's who he is. I can't say enough about Andrew Wiggins. And you guys are going to roast me for this, but he's 22 and 15 in his last 2 games. Right? 22 and 15 in his last 2 games. So if we go Game 6 and he goes 25, 12, and they win, are we having a different conversation about who the finals MVP is? Or is it outright, it's Steph Curry, no question about it? Because like I've said this in the past, the only way that I can describe Andrew Wiggins is he's money that you forgot that you had. That's who Andrew Wiggins is. He's a crumpled up $20 bill. He's a crumpled up $50 bill that you find in the dryer. I didn't know I had this. Where'd this come from? And in terms of an athlete, he looks like the kind of guy who can run all day. And this has always been him. I mean, we forget that, when he played in Minnesota before he got to Golden State, he was 20 a game for his career. He was a 20 a game guy. Now, the problem with him being in Minnesota was maybe he wasn't a number 1 on a championship team. And a lot of guys get miscast as that. Even though he was the number 1 overall pick, maybe he wasn't a number 1 on a championship team. And maybe him and Cat, it just didn't work between those two. That doesn't mean that when he gets with a group that's more suited for his game, like the Golden State Warriors, where we get out in transition. We get a lot of action off the basketball. We get a lot of movement. That's more suited to his game because he's a transition player. Because he's a really good secondary break guy. Because he's a good one-on-one player. It works for what they're doing. And I think he's really good as a number 3, even a number 2 in this system. Absolutely he is. And since we're on the subject of ball movement and player movement, I think Udoka got out-coached last night. I do. And not only did he get out-coached, I think his bench got exposed. He's only been using 7, 8 guys. And the reason why he's been only using 7, 8 guys, sometimes 9, with Tice. He'll go Pritchard, he'll go White, he'll go Williams, and he'll go Thice. So that's 9 guys. But when those guys are very average, they look average. I mean, they got outscored last night 31 to 4 off their bench. 31 to 4. Now you can't account for Gary Payton coming off the bench and giving me 15. I was not prepared for that. I'm not. But in terms of Steve Kerr's rotations and knowing when to get Steph Curry out of the game, knowing when to keep Poole in the game, and not only knowing when to keep Poole in the game, Udoka knowing when to go after Poole and to keep going after Poole to make Steve Kerr aware that I can't keep him on the floor. I may need to do something different where I got to go zone because he's a liability on defense. That matchup wasn't exploited nearly enough as it should have been. Nearly enough as it should have been. For Jordan Poole and Gary Payton to give you 29 between the both of them, that was huge. Absolutely huge. The Boston Celtics got going later on in the game. You know, they turned into the Warriors in the third quarter. 35 points, and they basically held down the Warriors to 24 points. And the reason why they did that is because they got back to who the Boston Celtics were. They got a lot of their stuff in transition. They got a lot of their stuff in transition. They got a lot of their stuff off turnovers. Because they caused the Warriors to turn the basketball over in the third quarter. And how did they do that? Pick up points, rebounding the basketball. They caused a lot of turnovers, and they caused a lot of action for themselves. But then they got away from that in the fourth. They allowed the Golden State Warriors, who are a transition team, they started to slow the game down. And when they slowed the game down, the ball started moving. Well, if the ball's moving, that means people are moving. And when people are moving, we all know that the defense is off balance. And I thought Steve Kerr did a great job of making the Boston Celtics defend for stretches, as opposed to the Celtics, who really didn't make Golden State defend for stretches. It was one pass shot. The offense was very disoriented. It looked very disorganized. It just didn't look like they were together. Game 6, I had the Warriors picked to win this series in 6. I just didn't have them doing it this way. I'm having a difficult time seeing the Warriors beat the Celtics 3 straight games. Considering how good the Celtics are after a loss, number one, and how good they are at home. I didn't have the Golden State Warriors beating these guys 3 times in a row. I'm having a difficult time seeing them beat the Celtics 3 times in a row. This game 6 is going to be everything. They're going to get everything from the Warriors, from the Celtics, that they have. Everything. And this game is going to be a telltale early in terms of effort. Because if you get that effort, if you can break them early, because when they give you everything, the Celtics give you everything that they have, and you can withstand that, you can break them. You can absolutely break them. And I just have a difficult time seeing that happen. I don't think that Jason Tatum, being the player that he is, he's going to allow that to happen. I don't think Jaylen Brown's going to allow that to happen. I don't think Marcus Smart. I don't think Al Horford is going to allow that to happen. We talk a lot about Jason Tatum being on this stage, and as critical as I am of him, and the reason why I'm as critical of him is because I see a guy who has best player in the game potential. But a lot of us forget that, he's a young guy. He's only in year 5. But we don't want to hear that simply because you're on this stage. And because you're on this stage, we expect you to perform at an elite level constantly. So he knows that he has to be better. He absolutely knows that he has to be better, and I think that he will be better. I think that Jaylen Brown will be better. I think that the Celtics will be better. But I also think that Steph Curry is going to be better too. I also think that Klay Thompson is going to be better. I thought they got some really good minutes out of Dre. I think that Dre is starting to get back to who Dre is, being that energy guy, being the smart player that he is, and give them the minutes that he gave them. And this is an interesting series. I don't think it ends on Thursday, because I'm having a difficult time seeing the Golden State Warriors beat Boston 3 straight. I'm having a difficult time with that. So I'm really looking forward to it. So I'll see you guys soon, man. Like I said, I'll be here for as long as you guys want me to, and we'll do it again real soon. But until then, take it light, but take it.